Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this first 2021 episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe with me, Tom Sherrington, and Emma Turner. Hello, Emma.
Hi, you're right. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, and Happy New Year to people who have been listening to our podcast version. It's fantastic to see the podcast going out on lots of different platforms, as well as people watching the YouTube version. So thank you for joining us. And we're going to be talking in this episode about the key thing which is dominating everybody's thinking, which is returning to remote teaching in the UK. And I know some people in the US have been doing this all the way along. But in England, for certain, people went sort of back to school and got back into the whole thing of teaching normally again. And now we're back to full-on remote learning with schools basically online, apart from key worker children, till at least February. So that's February half term. So that's really interesting. And a lot of people are talking about it. So Emma, have you been doing some online teaching yourself?
I've been doing lots of online delivery since March, learned lots of lessons along the way. But it's a real steep learning curve because it kind of flips everything you know about delivery, especially assessment and things, on its head. So it's a real steep learning curve for everybody in teaching at the moment. And I think there's some great practice out there, some great sharing of ideas and strategies. But we're all kind of in the same boat trying to feel our way through it at the moment.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to do in this episode, we're going to talk about some of the ideas we've had. And I'll be honest, I mean, like a lot of the things I do when I talk about teaching, I think you have to put your hand up and say, look, I don't do this myself, but I have engaged with it for lots of different people. So I've seen my wife sitting in this chair teaching her class, even this morning. She was teaching chemistry to her students via Teams, and I've heard her teach many lessons sitting here. But I've also seen lessons coming the other way. And I've had recently a lot of teachers sharing ideas with me about how they use all the different platforms. And it is really interesting because I think there's a big difference between kind of muddling through to kind of cope and realizing that, no, this is the way school is being done. This is a long-term thing. It's not just a bit of a filler. Yeah. And I think that has changed people's attitudes, because I even think in the summer lockdown, there was some kind of just like get through to summer and then we'll kind of recover afterwards. But now people see that we have to teach the children as if this is the deal. There's no kind of catch up after this. This is where they will learn. And some people are learning more about their platform functions and things now than they did before, because they didn't think they perhaps needed to. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, I think that's partly not because teachers didn't want to engage with it, but I think it's partly because the messages that schools were given at such short notice, and there was no kind of long-term strategy that this is actually going to become a long-term way of working. I think if somebody had said in March, by January, you all need to be completely au fait with this because this is the way it's going to go, people would have engaged with it a lot more. That's partly to do with the fact that the messages that schools were receiving were they just carry on as normal. And it's all credit to teachers, the fact that they've responded so quickly to actually realising that we do need to get this together as quickly as possible in as most effective format as possible. Because like you say, it is the way that it's going to go. It is the way that it's going to stay. And I've just been absolutely blown away by people's generosity, especially those people who beforehand were kind of really tech savvy, sharing their time, sharing their expertise. They've kind of all of a sudden become the gods of the teaching profession. People throwing metaphorical rose petals at their feet. Please help me, please help me. But all credit to people who, alongside everything else, their own worries, their own anxieties, their own concerns about everything, have taken on a completely new way of working, not least early career teachers who are entering the profession and wrangling with all of this. So it is a big learning curve. It has been not potentially as strategic as it could be, but that's partly because we weren't given the messages in good enough time. But all credit to everybody who's really thrown themselves into this completely wholeheartedly and recognised that everything that we're doing is to try and improve the outcomes for the children who are, I say, in the schools, the children of our schools rather than the children that are in our schools. So yeah, I'm just completely blown away by what everyone's done, to be honest.
And one of the things I think is important to say, I mean, sometimes I always worry about this, that you're telling people to do stuff that they already do. But actually, all the time, I'm being asked by people I'm talking to online, can you help with this? How would you deal with this? And I think there are lots of teachers who actually still need support, training, encouragement to do this, even though it's not the first time they've done it. I think it'd be worth talking about some of the things. So I think there are a few sort of areas of teaching which you need to sort of rethink or sort of hyper emphasize because it's online. And it depends on massively whether or not it's a live session where the children are there, or whether it's asynchronous where you're just presenting material and then they're going to do it later, or whether it's entirely remote where you're just communicating with them through documents. And each one of those has value. And even the government's, the inspectorate in England, Ofsted, recently published a thing just yesterday saying the evidence is that online only isn't necessarily better than some online and a mixture. So let's think about some of those things. So for me, one of the most obvious things is just checking people are there and knowing they're engaging. And there's a fantastic meme, people have probably seen it, where the secondary class, I
posted it online.
I don't know where it came from.
It got 9,000 views and over 4,000 retweets or something. It was ridiculous.
I've had that sent to me about 6 times from different people. It's like the primary classroom is people saying, look at my dad's shoe and all this thing. And the secondary classroom is all just like the letter that the children are off camera and, the teacher's saying, hello. Now, so this is the first thing is, and when I do I don't want to turn this into a training session, but I do think that basic thing of conspicuously making children feel that they're present when they're present is important. So using their name, cold calling, that type of thing. And I've seen teachers do that really well. It's just such an obvious thing, but it's so important. Even if they're on microphone only and not on camera, you're saying, Ibrahim, tell me what your answer was for number 5 or something. Even if he then types it in the chat, the fact that you have spoken to him and he's engaged. Now, ideally, you're seeing Ibrahim and he's talking to you and you're saying that. But even if he hears you and writes back, there's a communication there and you're verifying that he's there. And then you establish this idea that, that the teacher notices, and you've got your list and you see the people who are there. And I've seen a very simple thing, which I saw someone modeling on a YouTube clip, which was what they do at the start of the lesson. When people come on, they have a shared document, which everyone can see the lesson objectives on. So they come onto the lesson, and there's the plan. And there's a box next to it where you just type in your name. And it's like, so you don't have to take the register. You just see everyone's, and because it's like a shared document, you see the names kind of appearing as the children come in, and and they know to do that every time. So I go on, I open the document, I type in my name, and the teacher can see all the names arriving. And that to me is such a neat idea of making it feel I'm present, even when what everyone is looking at is just a document on the screen. It's just that, that sort of thing is ingenious, but obvious, but so powerful.
Mm. And it's different as well, being online, and one of the things that I noticed as well is how much you rely on physically seeing pupils in the lesson for your assessment, for the pace of your lesson, for, when we're just going to stop or when we're going to go over something. I think that being able to see and connect with the pupils online is even more important than in the classroom, because you pick up so many kind of non-verbal cues when you're looking at your classroom. Even just, for example, when you're teaching, you'll think, I've had loads of answers from over the left-hand side of the room, or loads from the right, or, this group here looks really puzzled with what I'm saying. You can't see that online. So it's trying to find and develop strategies for ensuring that you're really picking up on those cues, because I've seen loads of people online saying, well, it's all about just scaffolding and doing this, and good teaching is good teaching. Well, it is, but part of good teaching is seeing and picking up on the responses to your children. So actually, it's almost like we don't need to focus as much on the don't focus on the teaching, but we need to be hyper vigilant about the assessment that we're getting back through the screen, rather than worrying so much about what we're presenting through the screen, because we know that we can teach, because we can teach in a classroom. What the barrier that we've got to get over is actually what we're getting back off the children, because that's the bit that's not there, and that's the bit that's missing. That, for me anyway, that's what I've found. I'm not worried about how I'm going to present and how I'm going to teach. I know I can do that.
Yeah.
What I can't do is get back from the kids. So I can scaffold as much as you like. I can teach as much as you like. I can do step by step, that, you know, all of that bit. I've done it for years. I can do it no problem at all. What I can't do is see into those kids. And it's difficult enough when they're sat in front of you to know what's actually going in and what they're actually thinking. To then not be able to see their faces and to rely solely on a chat bar or a little ABC thing.
No, it's hard.
Difficult. So difficult.
I think it's hard. I mean, yesterday I did a training session for the walkthroughs where I just presented some stuff, and the way I messed it up when I set up my screen. So it was
no, you didn't. You don't mess things up, Mr. Shaw.
But it was in I set it up so it was in a full screen mode on my laptop, and because I'd already started, I didn't want to faff about. But because it was in a full screen, I couldn't see myself or anybody else. So I was there presenting my slide, just staring at the little thing at the top, thinking, I have to trust everyone can see me and that this is being recorded, because otherwise I'm just talking at my laptop. But of course, it turned out fine. And when I played it back, people had been able to see me, but I couldn't tell that, and I couldn't see any of them. So it was all a bit odd. You're sort of standing in a room talking at a laptop. Now, of course, that's when you're doing a presentation. But I do think this is the thing I think people need to think hard about when they're preparing, is to sort of almost separate it. So what do I need to tell them stuff, explain some ideas? So I make a video and then just show it, or tell them where it is, or access the fantastic tools that are in things like Oak National or on YouTube, all these other great places. So someone else presents the information. So there's the giving the information. But then it's the kind of, okay, so what do the children then do? And of course, some of the kids won't be able to watch you live because their brother's on Zoom with their class. So there's all of that. And so you have to sort of set up tasks which you can check. And this is what I've learned the most about recently. It sounds obvious, but I just think it's brilliant what people have done. And my most favorite example is using shared PowerPoint slides as a notebook. Because you don't even need a platform for that. You don't need like Teams or Google Classroom. You can use it in those, like Google Classroom has slides, and Teams has got OneNote. But even if you don't have those platforms, you can set up a shared slide in, say, Google Slides, and emailing it to everyone. And then they all have their own slide in which they can write in. So you set them the task and you say, either name a page for yourself, or they'll find their name already in it because the teachers put them in advance. And then they start, when they're doing their work, they're doing it in the slide. And then the teacher can see everyone's work kind of arriving live. They can just, because it's shared, they can just dip in on each child's page and see what they've written. And it could be just one short question, or it could be a whole bit of writing. And I think that's really clever. And I hadn't thought about that before, because you could do that live during a lesson or offline, like during the week. I've given you use this page to do your answers, and then of course the kids have to type though. That's the thing. There's no handwritten stuff there. Yeah,
and that's a real issue for primary. I think a lot of these strategies work really well for children who've got secure levels of literacy, or older children. I mean, my children are 10 now. I don't know how old my kids are. 10, 7 and 4. So the youngest in foundation. Yeah. Trying to do remote learning with very young children is a whole different kettle of fish.
So how do they do their work?
How do they do it? In shifts, because we haven't got 3 spare devices. And the school's brilliant. They've sent a mixture of kind of recorded stuff by their own teacher, links to Oak National stuff that they can do with a parent, stuff that they can do on their own. So there's a real opportunity for them to do stuff as and when. And then with the children submit their work, photographs of their work. They're all completely skilled now in taking the photo and uploading it. And then sometimes the teachers will just type a little comment. This morning I had a beautiful recorded comment from one of the year 6 teachers who'd recorded something for my eldest who'd done some work with her little brother, and she's like, I'm going to pass this on to your EYFS teacher, show them, they'll be really pleased, which was really lovely. But the point I wanted to make is with EYFS, I've had to sit with him the entire time he's had to do something. And he's a very bright little boy, but he hasn't got A, the concentration, B, the skills, or C, the understanding of the rules and routines that are associated with learning yet, because he's only just started school and it's been massively disrupted. So in terms of support for children, if you're in a household where you've got very young children, all these whizzy bang tricks and tips and stuff, actually as a parent, as a consumer of it, you're a bit like, doesn't really work. I still need to sit with them. They still need that adult support. So I was.
How much work do you photograph then to submit? I mean, that's one of the things I'm interested in. So what do you take pictures of?
Oh, so my middle one had to take a photo of this phonics investigation that she'd done, and she literally holds it up to the camera, presses click, and then they can see that. My eldest ones had to sort of make presentations, electronic presentations, and send them in, or write a piece of work, or complete a maths piece. They sent home, I haven't got it actually, they sent home an exercise book. Here we go. They sent home an exercise book with the children at the beginning of term with all their logins and everything, and they complete their work, and then they just have to take a photograph of it and upload it. So they've still got their workbook at home, which is really useful, but it's really hard work with children who've got not completely independent.
Yeah, so that is something which you can't stress enough, that this home learning situation for primary, especially the younger they are, the more reliant they are. So all those parents, I mean, I know lots of people who, like I work with, who, when I say, oh, we're sort of back at home again, they say, yeah, but you have to remember that means my children are here, and I have to, so, and I think, oh gosh, yeah, of course, so your children are with you at home, and that's the thing, that's a big issue. So I do think, gosh, we can't really underestimate that. And then for the teachers, I think for a primary class, to be honest, because you do have typically one class and it's 30 kids, and you've got at least a finite number of children, and therefore you can say, okay, I'm going to receive photographs from them, and you can kind of, I guess you can sample that even. You don't have to look at absolutely everything, but for a secondary teacher, which we might have, say, 6 classes, and you've got, I don't know, 100 plus, to get all these photos and stuff coming in, it just you'd be overwhelmed with the number of different things to open. So I guess the more live and dynamic it is, whether it's using online tools, the easier. But yeah, you've got to find.
I have noticed that some of the tasks now the teachers put, there is no need to upload any evidence for this piece of work.
Oh, really? Yeah. I don't blame them. I think I think this is another thing I was going to discuss in this whole thing is, there's a neat trick teachers, I think, need to play with a kind of accountability, which is the checking. You need to do enough checking so that the kids feel that you'll notice if they do it or not. Mm. So that when they're working at home, they think, I've got to finish this and I've got to finish that. So a simple thing like by the end of this fortnight, here's a list of all the things you should have finished. Have you done them? And so you can tick them off. That to me as a parent or a teacher would be really helpful, to know I've sent a list and have you done all these things? I
can tell your secondary time, a fortnight's a very long time.
Of course it is. And you might be setting essays, questions. And the other thing is, if you've got lots of classes, you can't check all of them every week. So it's going to be difficult if you had to check off, 30 kids times 6 activities, it would just become. So you set it at a certain frequency but you don't have to literally check every detail of all of that work. It's just making sure the students feel like, I need to have done this because the teacher has said so, and do enough checking so they you think, oh, actually, they do notice if I don't turn up, or they do notice if I haven't submitted anything.
And the whole thing about maintaining that relationship as well. I mean, my children's schools are brilliant. They've sent home Open National stuff. They've sent home recorded bits from their own teachers. But I tell you what, and I tweeted about it yesterday, was my middle one. She did a load of Oak National stuff. She did a load of the bit response. And then she clicked on this link and there was her teacher teaching phonics. And I'm not kidding you, she jumped off the chair and went, Mummy, look, it's Mrs. So-and-so, it's Mrs. So-and-so. Look. And she was so unbelievably excited to see her teacher there. And I do think as well, especially for primary, that they need that connection to their class teacher, because it's such.
So was that a video that they'd made?
Yeah, pre-prepared video.
So she could watch it any time.
Yeah, watch it anytime. It was just 10 minutes of her phonics lesson, but she literally jumped off the chair with excitement just to see her teacher's face. And if you're talking about motivation and attention and engagement for primary children, it's so important that they maintain that connection to their sole class teacher, because they're such an important person in their lives. And I see it every day. Their faces just light up when they see their own teacher. That's not to say to put pressure on class teachers to produce full content, but just to kind of be mindful of the fact that the relationship aspect is so important for motivation, for attention, for basically for encouraging the children to keep on working. And then I saw a tweet this morning from a head teacher in our trust that are working. Was it last night? Yeah, last night. He said he'd made one of his teachers so angry she'd thrown a pen on the floor. And he went on to say that was because he'd walked into her classroom when she was trying to film some pre-recorded content. And it made me laugh at the time. And then I thought about it, reflecting on it. I thought, do you know what? In a normal lesson, you wouldn't freak out if like the flip chart paper fell down or somebody walked in, or the pen didn't work. You'd go, oh, for goodness sake. I do think as teachers, we're putting a massive amount of pressure on ourselves to produce kind of Spielberg-esque quality pieces of work, rather than a real representation of, I've dropped the pen, I've done this.
I think so, yeah. In fact, the more human it is, and I'm just doing this, the more that you feel like you're just talking to the class, the probably the better it is, I think. You're right. I mean, some people, a bit extra on it, but I think, I've seen lots of people saying this, like a simple thing like self-recording on Zoom, where you show your slides, and, or you can just be on camera, you just press record and there you are, and then it's a nice simple file size and bosh, it goes up or whatever. I think that's really good. Yeah. I think one of the things, though, I think with, say, secondary, because what can happen is the opposite, where you've got, like nobody is their main teacher and their form tutor doesn't teach them their subject, say. Yeah. So who is the person? And you can have some children, let's face it, this is what we talk about a lot here, is imagine the child who's got, as you've described, in multiple siblings. So just the simple practicalities, we can't all be online at once. Yeah. So we have to have asynchronous learning. So I can't watch the teacher live. That doesn't really work so well. So I don't do any of that. I've got all my resources off the system. I'm doing my work. But I have to rely on that happening. And it's all non-verbal. It's all just week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. It's like that contact is drifting and drifting. And there are children there who's just like moving away. So what they've done at my wife's school, I think they've planned this thing. They've only just decided to do this, so I don't know if it's happened yet. But to have it's almost like a fire break in every 10 days, like every 2 weeks, 1 day is a break from any online delivery. Yeah. And so that the students have a day where they just have to do independent work, and the teachers can then kind of mop up stuff like just getting ready for the next cycle of days, planning, but also making the odd call to the kids who they're thinking, where are you? Yeah. And where have you been? Because you haven't. And I think that type of giving the teachers the time to do that, the planning and the contact, whereas the rest of the time they're kind of on supervising and doing more. It's really, really a good idea.
Because there's been some schools where they've insisted that all the content is live, or if it's not live, then it's a live equivalent in terms of recorded delivery, like 6 hours of recorded delivery a day. And I just think that's completely unsustainable for teachers and unrealistic for children as well, because I was thinking about, Just the normal day for a child, even a secondary child, you get up, you walk, you move around the school, you walk to the lunch hall. And for younger children, there's so much extra sort of playtime and break times and running around. We mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of what's best for child development as well. No child development specialist would say the best thing for a child to do is to sit in front of a screen for 6 hours solid. So in the rush to kind of move our entire school day online, we kind of got to recognise that a lot of our school day isn't bums on seats looking at a teacher. A lot of it is, running around, playing, interacting, going to assembly, walking around, transitioning around the building.
Exactly. And even in a lesson, we talk about this a lot, which is a funny thing, which is that when they're having conversations, like pastoral conversations about certain students at school, which I hear, when the Zoom chats are going on, and I've heard these, they're talking about certain students who are hard to engage. And they say, yeah, but you have to remember that when they're at school, it's not like when they're in lessons, they're not like, present mentally all that time either. So for them to be present for an hour and then another hour and then another hour on screen is going to kill them, because that's not their normal life. Their normal life is much shorter bits of focus and then another one. That's a normal school day for kids. They switch on and off naturally as adults would. Actually, if you've ever spent 5 days following a child 5 hours following a child in the school, it's absolutely exhausting.
Yeah, and this is why.
Oh my God, how do they cope?
I don't know where this arbitrary 3 or 4 hours came from that we've got to provide for children now. But I was trying to work it out the other day about how much actual kind of teaching time would a child get normally during a day. And it's not a massive amount in terms of the teacher actually delivering stuff. So it's no wonder people are finding it a struggle to suddenly fill 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of delivered content, because we don't normally do that. You don't deliver for 5 or 6 hours. In a lesson, especially in primary, you might have the equivalent of you delivering for sort of 10 or 20 minutes and then a little bit of group work here and there. But for a lot of the lesson, the children just getting on with stuff.
But I do think even in a situation, and I know people who see this happening in the situation where they, to be honest with you, if people, in some independent schools, for example, where they've been able to make the default assumption that every single child has their own laptop.
Yeah.
So right back to March, they switched to full online learning and have all along. And they almost follow a normal school timetable every day because they can, and every child is there. In those lessons, the teacher isn't on the whole time. They talked for 5 minutes like they would in lesson, set a task, and they're there kind of, but they're not talking. They're just maybe, while the students are doing their work, they're asking a question, they're doing a little breakout room with one student and stuff. So I do think giving yourself the time, even though, say, in an hour's slot to say input here, but it could be like 40 minutes of practice time where you're kind of present, and maybe, especially with these online shared documents chipping in. So people have got to be kind to themselves. Yeah. But I tell you, one of the things I think is really, really key in terms of the curriculum side of it is, as a parent, I'm thinking this just anyway with normal school, is knowing what they're supposed to have done. Like when you're checking the kids' homework, what are you supposed to have done? Well, there's a list. It's like, I can't hear what the teacher said, but I've got the list, and the list says this is what they should have done. So I can say to my son or daughter, have you done this? That's what it says. And that type of checklist of stuff you should have done is so more important than ever. And I know that sounds so obvious to say it, but I think keep focusing on that, because it might be done live or on your own time. But as long as you've finished everything you're supposed to, you can super flex it, can't you?
You know more about the flex, Tom.
Yeah.
My kids, every day, they get a timetable sent through. And it's the same.
Every day?
Well, no, the timetable for the week is attached to the top of the day's things. So we can see roughly what we should have covered every day, but also what's coming up. And it's like yesterday, my youngest had just had enough of there were 3 5-minute phonics things that he had to do throughout the day. Just didn't want to do the third one. He was just not in the mood. yesterday and I wasn't going to push it. So he's done 4 today. So we've done them all because he really wanted to do it. But I felt able to do that as a parent because I've got the week's timetable. Like you say, I know what's coming up. I know what we've got to cover. And then they've been very savvy and they've put things like, if your child finishes all of this and you want some more stuff for them to do, here's a little project that you might want to do. So they've kind of neatly sidestepped that bit about, there's a crew of parents who are saying there's far too much. And then there's another crew of parents saying, oh, there's not enough content. So they very neatly got around that by saying, if you've done all of this, there's also all of this you could do as well. So knock yourselves out.
Yeah, it's one of the things I made for people because even people sometimes assume I teach at all levels, and so I have to sometimes make stuff up as if I was teaching. And one of the things I made last term was in the summer was a thing I call it the Universal Project Guide, and a lot of people have downloaded it, so they obviously find it useful. So basically,
you made it up. I love it.
It's a side of A4, which basically says, if you're going to do a project, this is what it should be like. And it gives guidance about so a project is like a question, something like, what was it like in Mesopotamia or something like that. So you then have to answer that question. So you have to find out about Mesopotamia, and then you have to create a kind of scrapbook of images and stuff. And then you have to present a kind of report on that. And then you have to make a quiz so that you quiz your parents on whether they've learned stuff from your project. And it's like, but all of that, is actually quite engaging. And I some of the things that my kids talk about from when they were at primary school are still those extended things that they made. So I think there is scope with this online learning world to do individual projects, provided there is a structure, which is kind of what I was trying to do there, alongside the curriculum coverage aspect.
And it's also access to resources, not only practical or physical resources, but actually being able to get out and visit places, do things, see things that might support that project learning, which is a little bit hindered at the moment. But my children just like to root around in the recycling bin and find things to do their projects with. They made a football pitch the other day, complete with floodlights and this, that, and the other.
Wow. What's your feeling about the feedback? Because one of the things that sometimes teachers have asked me about or struggle with is okay, we've set the work, we've told the kids what to do, they're doing it, I can check they're doing it, but how do I then tell them to do it better and give feedback? That in itself. So the various people on my survey last week were suggesting things like, well, there are lots of good ideas. If it's like some apps and stuff, whether for primary teachers saying you've got the photo and you kind of, one of them showed me you literally just write on the photo and send it back. Some were doing like little voice notes on an app I think it's called Moat, and other voice recording apps. But then you need to know how that works, how to append it. There are lots of comments, things on Google Docs and all the rest of it. So there are lots of ways. And my favorite one of all was just simply using forms, Google Forms to do questions. And the students can see, you can then create a list of all their answers and quite easily show them the correct answers, and they can self-check. Anything the students can check their own answers is best of all, I think. So how have you done it at home?
I mean, they've had all of those things pretty much. They've had sort of verbal, like voice recorded feedback. My eldest has had like proper feedback points for pieces of work that she's done where she's had to go back and do the corrections and resubmit that. And then some of them are just sort of generic feedback. Oh, that was really, you've made a really lovely model. Well done. I can see you've worked hard. So there's been a real mix of kind of encouragement and connection type feedback. Then there's been the specific feedback that they've had to act on. Some of it's voice recorded, some of it's typed. It's been a real kind of horses for courses, really, because there'd be no point the EYFS teacher typing tons of stuff about my little one's phonics. There's no point because he can't read it. And that's that whole thing about workload, and would you do it at this level in your classroom? If you wouldn't do it at this level in your classroom in normal circumstances because it would create too much work, it's kind of like, well, don't beat yourself up if you can't maintain that level of feedback. when you're also trying to learn all these new skills, navigate all this new tech, teach in a completely different way? And actually, is it helpful? Because like with any feedback mechanism, unless it's going to actually improve either the children's kind of attention or engagement or likelihood to kind of interact with you, or it's actually going to move their learning forward, there's no point doing it.
No, I agree. In fact, for me, I mean, my instinct would be, and same as other people I've spoken to as a science teacher, is I teach them loads of stuff, and we interact, and I set them work. But really, the only time I know if they know it is when I set them a test, because then they have to do it on their own. Mm. So I think that type of rhythm of, we teach, and then on this day or that day, there'll be a kind of a formative test. And it could be a simple, quick, like 10-minute thing, or it could be half an hour. But whatever it is, it's those tests which will tell you whether it's going well. And I think if you have them built in throughout the online learning period, then everyone knows kind of how it's going.
That in itself, though, Tom, doesn't that throw up a completely different dimension? Because obviously when you do a test in a class, you can control what they have access to. When you're testing somebody at home, they can have anything in front of them to help support their answer. So it kind of questions the validity of the score or the outcome, I guess.
It does, but you have to remember the situation. So you're saying to the kids, and the parents, try to do the test as honestly as you can, then I'll know how well you're doing. And
I'm 15, I'm going to go.
To be honest with you, if they cheat or whatever, then what can you do? But my experience of this stuff is that even when you're not 100% sure on the reliability, you still get enough of a sense that they're still not perfect answers, and they're still getting some stuff wrong. So you've got enough material to reteach. Yeah. Of course, it's not how you would set up sort of public exam, but it isn't that, is it? You just have to say, honestly, do your best. And then there are some things you can do live. So I think overcooking that is hard. If I send you a test to do, and I say to you as your instructions, give yourself half an hour, don't look at your books, and then send it back. Now, of course, if kids don't do that, well, you have to just live with that imperfection, and you don't compare the scores. You're just trying to find out, are they learning the stuff or not? And of course, you can verify with, in any lesson. So all these things are hard. I think we could talk about this for ages, but it's amazing. I want to say, if we sort of come to a close here, I want to just point to the book at the back there. So Doug Lemov, who is one of our next guests. I mean, we are massively excited about this. We are soon going to be meeting the total legend, Doug Lemov. And I don't know if it's fair to you to say, what does he say in the book? Does he talk about some of the stuff we've just been discussing?
Yeah, very much about feedback, very much about checking. The big thing that I took from the book was about dissolving the screen. The whole point about online delivery is that you're trying to get rid of the barrier of the screen as much as you possibly can to replicate the natural rhythm and the natural delivery that you would have in the classroom. And what's really nice about the book is that he's got loads of clips to videos of people actually doing what he says. So he's kind of dissolved the page really and brought it to life, because you can follow the video clip. He'll explain something, then you watch the video of it actually happening in real time with a real teacher in a real setting. So I absolutely loved it, because it was incredibly comforting to know that a lot of what we're doing is actually, I wouldn't say the right thing, but is the effective thing that we're doing. And he also reiterates that a lot of what great teaching is still great teaching online. You don't have to suddenly become like Bill Gates and be able to sort of build these amazing platforms and do amazing things. You're still the biggest resource that the children have. You've got, and it's just getting yourself in front of them by, as he says, dissolving the screen. So I absolutely adore the book, and I can't wait to speak to him. And it's called Doug Lemov and the Teach Like a Champion Team, Teaching in the Online Classroom, Surviving and Thriving in the New Normal. So you don't have to be brilliant tech either.
There's that whole world, isn't it? And I think we have to reiterate, this is how complicated this whole is. You've got the world of the children in front of you on the screen and talking to them, and then you've got the world of they're not on the screen. In fact, you're hoping they're doing stuff at home that you've set up for them and checking that that's being done without you seeing them do it ever is the reality for a lot of kids. And that is so hard. So look, I think the one thing I want to say to you is that I just think, for example, when I put a tweet out, I was sitting here, you know, like I do all the time because with no school to go to. And who's got some ideas about this? And I just got this torrent of replies, like 300, 400 replies. And it took me ages to sort of compile it all because there were so many. And I just think, wow, isn't that just brilliant? Teachers are brilliant. It's so creative, so innovative. And of course, you know, as they say, you know, about crisis leads to kind of, you know, what's the phrase about being the mother of invention? But it is amazing.
Mother of invention.
I just think teachers are brilliant the way that people are responding. But there's no question that some people are way further down the track than others, and there's still a lot of kind of support that people need. So well done to everyone kind of wrestling with it.
And what's really been brought home to me over the last few weeks and of doing this, or the last few months really, is that actually what a human profession teaching is and how much it relies on human interaction. And I think that one thing that we've learned is that I don't think we would ever choose complete remote online learning, because actually really effective teaching needs to be kind of human to human, not through that device, because of all the little nuances that you pick up from people's voices, people's gestures, people's body language. It really hammered home how skilled teachers are in kind of human interaction, not just academia and delivery, but actually what brilliant blooming humans teachers are.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so let's finish there. Thank you so much to everyone listening to this episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe. You're doing amazing work, and we look forward to yours joining us for our interview with Doug Lemov and other exciting guests coming up later this term. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.